In his early 20s, Adolf Hitler reached the lowest point of his life. As an impoverished artist, he first lives on the streets and later in a homeless shelter in Vienna. At this moment it seems hard to imagine that he would end up as a dictator. Nevertheless, he is already starting to have heated political debates. Hitler loved to talk and give monologues, a talent that would later play a crucial role in his political rise. Adolf Hitler unconsciously completed the apprenticeship of his later dictatorship in Vienna. Everything that would define later National Socialism is already present here: racial and Jewish hatred, German nationalist propaganda, politics for the masses. Hitler absorbs everything he sees, hears and experiences in Vienna like a sponge that absorbs and stores impressions, voices and slogans. But how does he manage to get from an Austrian men's dormitory to the top of German politics? You will now find out in the second part of our Hitler biography. In May 1913, Adolf Hitler moves to Munich. He probably wants to avoid the Austrian military service that is now coming up. At the same time, Hitler was considered an adult at the age of 24 under Austrian law at the time, and received his father's inheritance. So he can finally afford a real room in Munich again, but otherwise the upgrade is limited. Hitler continues to paint postcards, sits in cafes and has political debates. He has learned nothing useful and has had little success in life. He is angry with himself and the whole world until the political situation changes his life forever. In June 1914, the heir to the Austrian throne and his wife were murdered. This assassination attempt leads to the First World War, in which the German Empire and Austria-Hungary fight against Russia, France and England. Hitler is extremely happy about the outbreak of war. Why so many young men? This is even captured in a photo. With the war, they finally have the chance to do something meaningful. Hitler wants to be brave and a hero. With this decision, he volunteers to fight for Germany and finds himself with countless comrades on the Western Front in Belgium. With the supposed victory in mind, he dreams of Germany and German-speaking Austria uniting to form a greater Germany and jointly dominating the European continent. But he quickly realizes that this war is different than any before. The armies fire grenades at each other over long distances, tanks crush the terrain and people, while planes drop bombs and poison gas blinds and kill soldiers. This senseless slaughter is trivialized and referred to as trench warfare, in which soldiers wait in trenches for the order to attack or for the enemy to deliver a fatal blow. Hitler doesn't work in the trenches but as a dispatcher, carrying messages from one place to another. Although dangerous, his military service is later portrayed by him as an ongoing act of heroism. But for his efforts he received the Iron Cross second and first class, the latter even at the suggestion of a Jewish officer. Nevertheless, Hitler remains a loner and only finds belonging and comradeship in battle. Instead of hanging out with comrades, drinking and going to a brothel during breaks in the fighting, he prefers to stay alone and write letters to friends in Munich in which he blames Jews and foreigners for Germany's failures in the war. In fact, over time, Germany and Austria are losing more and more soldiers and firepower, while their opponents are increasingly outnumbered and superior. From the autumn of 1917 onwards, the USA was also one of Germany's opponents of the war, but the German public was led to believe that victory was imminent. When the defeat of Germany and Austria was announced in the fall of 1918, Hitler was just as shocked as many others. Disappointment over the defeat and dissatisfaction with the political situation lead to turmoil in Germany. Instead of stable politics, there is a revolution in which socialist workers and soldiers abolish the empire and introduce democracy. This is how the Weimar Republic is born, but it is on shaky ground as the highest officers of the defeated German army spread a conspiracy theory to distract from their own guilt in the defeat. In Mein Kampf, Hitler later tells his readers that the news of the German defeat suddenly made him realize who was to blame. After this epiphany, he decided to become a politician to get back at the leftists and Jews, once again a legend. At the end of 1918, Adolf Hitler is back in Munich. For fear of slipping back into postcard dealers and homeless poverty, he stays in the military. Hitler now lives in a barracks, receives regular wages and serves in the then left-wing government in Bavaria. Yes, the very Hitler who is actually considered right-wing extremist. However, we still don't know how close Hitler really was to the politics of the time. Historians suspect that he simply adapted. A service to this could be found in Hitler's behavior. When the socialist prime minister is murdered in Bavaria and right-wing radicalism increases sharply in Munich, communists are now persecuted, including in the Reichswehr. Hitler, who turns from left to right like a flag in the wind, quickly sets up an investigative commission with 2 colleagues that rats out communist soldiers, some of whom were even former comrades of his. Hitler even made a career out of this behavior. He becomes an undercover agent and speaker in the reconnaissance and propaganda department of the Bavarian Reichswehr. Right-wing issues suit him, as he had already heard and absorbed most of them in Vienna before the war, especially the incitement against Jews. Anti-Semitism becomes the core of his worldview. Hitler realizes that he can influence his listeners through populist speeches, and thus influence them. Political monologues and arguments in men's dormitories and cafes become a professionalized activity. When Hitler speaks at a meeting of the far-right German Workers' Party, the party leader is so impressed by Hitler's talent that he asks him to join them. In September 1919, Hitler did the same. This accession laid the foundation for his well-known political career. The DAP later became the NSDAP, beer cellar speeches became politics for the masses, and Hitler became the Führer. Yes, these years explain why this man started the most devastating war in world history and murdered millions of people. It is only partially certain that Adolf Hitler did not have an easy childhood. With an abusive father who often rejected his ideas, Hitler developed an addiction to external validation and cheer. He finds both among the members of the NSDAP. But the society of the time also played a part in his rise. Without the anti-Semitic and xenophobic attitudes among parts of the population, Hitler would probably never have come to power. In this way, he creates the figure of the leader, in whom many people later believe and follow, even willingly going to war and accepting mass murder.